Hello everybody, this is going to be part 2 of the 1001 assignment to code through, in which we will be covering processing.py in all its glory. I realized today that yesterday when I was doing the entities.py recording, it was lower resolution than it could have been, and so today this video should look a lot more crisp. So let's get into it. Starting with processing.py, the first thing that I would be doing before I try to make a start, I guess, on AthleteResults is I'm going to be creating the other 3 classes. I'm going to create EventResults, CountryResults, and DeterminePlaces, and fill out their method stubs and all their docstrings. The reason I'm doing this is because that's essentially free marks. There's not a lot of thought there. It's just reading the assignment 2 task sheet, copying through everything that it says to do there. And if you actually have completed entities.py and you have all the method stubs working for processing.py and the docstrings, I believe then you will have passed assignment 2 without having to do any of the logic for processing. I am aware that, look, me copying AthleteResults 3 times and changing the code slightly for each different class is going to be a little bit boring to watch, so I'm probably just going to fast forward that all, maybe stopping briefly for CountryResults for the get number of gold or silver things, just because I want to show you how to write those docstrings. Okay, so I will see you shortly. Okay, so we are finally at the point where we want to be defining methods, get number of gold, get number of silver, get number of bronze, and get number of athletes. And what I really want to show here is just what I would do for the docstrings in that case. So, for what I want to do here in the docstring is just say, quite simply, and we can use a simple docstring in this because we're just returning something. I'm just wanting an int. And what that int is return the number of gold medals won by this country. And we're going to do the same sort of thing for all of the get number of x methods. Okay, so I'm going to continue to fast forward until I've done practically everything inside, or as far as method stub goes, inside processing.py. Okay, so now again that we have done all the docstrings, we've done all the method stubs, we've most likely passed this assignment. And you can see across here that all the method stubs are actually working out fine because we're passing all the tests for them and inside processing.py. So let's make a start now on, I guess, implementing all the methods here instead of just leaving them as pass or blank. So which class do we want to start with? I'm probably going to go about this in terms of ascending order of marks. So CountryResults was worth the least, followed by AthleteResults, then EventResults, and finally DeterminePlaces. I'm leaving those 3 for last, AthleteResults, Events, and DeterminePlaces, just because the sort method is going to be relatively the same for all 3 of them, and we're just going to, it's better to group them up, I guess, than have it disjointed. Before we start implementing anything though, I want to make the most important change here to all 4 classes, and what I'm going to do there is set results to be none by default for all 4 classes. So let's talk about why we might want to do that. If I leave it as this empty list here, what we saw frequently in student submissions was when we come down to get results and we're wanting to raise a value error if this process method has not yet been executed, quite often what we saw was if self._results is equal to this, raise value error. But as a thought experiment, what might happen for an athlete which we are processing which is not competing in any events? Well, in that case, at the end of processing this athlete, self.results would actually be equal to the empty list because, right, we have no events that he's competed in, and therefore we have no results. So coming down into get results again, we would actually raise a value error although we have processed this athlete, and that's not what we want to do. So I guess the best way around that is just to set results to be none by default. Another way of doing this would be to have a boolean value in the init method which was has this been processed yet or not. But yeah, I'm going to be changing this to none here. And I know this is a little bit sneaky because for our code that we gave you, AthleteResults did actually have an empty list here by default. Yeah, so I don't think we had any test directed at this specifically, but this is just something you might want to think about for either future courses, 2002 in particular, or I guess just any further assignments. Okay, so now instead of having if self.results is equal to the empty list here inside get results, we can say is equal to none, or is none. Either of them is fine in this case. Okay, so I'm just going to be copying and pasting this for the other three classes. Okay, and for all the classes as well, something I forgot to add at the very end of this is just otherwise we want to return self._results. Because we're going to assume at this point, if we have processed them, then this is going to be valid. We can just return self.results. Okay, so I'm in CountryResults now, and I'm wanting to make a start on the process method. So the first thing I want to be thinking about is what do I want at the very end of this method? Well, I'm wanting to update this self.results variable, right? And what I want it to look like at the very end is a list with the first item in the list being the number of golds, one by the country, the second being the silvers, third being the bronze medals, and fourth just being the number of athletes who competed for the country. So if I am thinking about all those things, or at least just the number of gold, silver, and bronze medals, I'm going to want variables to track them. So I can just say gold is equal to silver is equal to bronze is equal to 0. And what this line does, remember assignment works from right to left, so starting at the very right side, 0 is assigned to bronze, and then this sort of cascades through and sets gold, silver, and bronze all to 0. Okay, so at the very end, what I actually want to do is just this. Self._results is going to be equal to gold, silver, bronze, and then self._country.get athletes and the length of this. So what this does in this little part is I'm just getting the number with the length method or function, sorry, of the number of athletes in this country, and this is going to take the form we want for results after everything has been processed. So in between these two lines of code, we've got some thinking to do. How are we going to increment the number of gold, silver, and bronze medals appropriately so at the very end of this method, self.results, or this line rather, works as intended? Okay, so first of all, I'd like to take note that the only thing we really have inside CountryResults to start off with is a country that we initialized it with. So inside the country, we have this method which I've just used then, get athletes. And using that get athletes method, we are going to be one step further to our goal. So I'm going to be using comments here to break out this big function into smaller steps. The first thing I'm thinking about is get all the for each athlete in this country, get the corresponding, I guess, place for each event. Okay, so how do we do that? For each athlete in the country, that sounds like a for loop to me, maybe because I just said for there. I'm going to say for athlete in self._country.get athletes. Now I want to get the corresponding place for each event. And if we go back into entities.py, we can see that if we have an athlete, we can get all the events that they are currently competing in. So the method we want to do that with is get events here. Okay, so coming back into processing, I'm now going to say for event in athlete.getEvents. Now, what do I want to do? I have currently an athlete and an event. If I have an athlete and event, looking at athlete again, I know that I can actually get the corresponding result for that athlete in that particular event. I just realized my broadcast window has been open the whole time. Don't worry about that. So I'm going to be using this method getResult here. And after I use that getResult, I'm going to be able to get a place. So what I want to do here is, and this is a bit of foresight here, place is equal to athlete.getResult, and getResult takes an event. So this, currently, this whole block here, after execution will be a result. We don't want to set place to be a result. We actually want to get the place of that particular result. Last thing to fix here, we know that getPlace actually returns a string by default, so we just want to convert that to an integer. Okay, this line, although it's a bit, I guess, getting crowded here with the amount of things that we're doing, doesn't really need a comment in my mind, just because this sort of tells you exactly what it's doing. But this section is currently complete. So next section is, what we want to do is increment the appropriate medal count. Okay, and here's a block of code that I prepared earlier. So quite simply, all I'm doing here is that once we have the place, I'm just saying if the place is equal to 1, we're going to increment the golds, and similarly for silver and bronze. Okay, and then finally we are just going to set self._results to reflect that list that we want it to, I guess, being the gold, the silvers, the bronze, and then how many athletes are competing in it. Okay, so I had to stop the video for a little bit. I had a bit of a brain fart there. What I was doing was I ran the tests, and where is it? Where is it here? Country processing was still failing, and I was wondering why, because I felt like the process method was fine, and it looks fine to me. So I was staring at that for 5 minutes, doing exactly what I've been telling people to do, and I was not reading the error messages here, and all that it was testing, I was confused here. It says none is not equal to 0, and I was like, no, I swear I'm updating self.results, but I didn't look up here and say that it was actually, or see that it was actually trying to call get number of golds, which we haven't done yet. So let's fix that. Get results is working fine. If we want to get the number of golds now, that's quite simply, well, our internal self.results list is going to look like this. So the gold is just going to be the 0th index there. So we are just going to return self._results 0. And very similar for the other 3 methods here. In my own implementation, I did modify the way that get number of gold, silver, and bronze works, so that I copied and pasted this essentially. If I hadn't processed it or processed the results for this object, I would raise a value error. I don't think that was required in this case, but that is something you might want to do again, just as a bit more defensive programming. Okay, so let's check that that's all working now. Ta-da! Okay, country results tests are all passing. Cool. So one thing I forgot to mention when I was doing my implementation of this class is that in quite a few submissions that we had, I managed to see at least, people doing a lot of processing inside get number of X, whether it be gold, silver, bronze, or athletes. And this is extremely undesirable. So why might that be? Well, if you consider the use case of this class, process is likely going to be called only a handful of times, whereas get results or get number of whatever, these are going to be called a great deal many more times in comparison to process. So if we end up having the bulk of our processing happening in these methods, well, I guess that's inefficient, right? As opposed to it just being completely localized within process. So that was one error that I saw quite frequently inside processing. So now let's move on to, what are we going to move on to? Athlete results, I believe. And we'll start to do some sorting. Okay, so I am now up in athlete results, and I'm wanting to make a start on its process method. So what does this class do, what does process do in this case? It gets all the results for this athlete and orders them from best to worst placing. And if two or more results have the same place, then the results are ordered by the corresponding event name in ascending alphabetical order. Okay. So inside this process here, or this process method, I'm going to be making a few comments as to the sections that I'm going to be filling in. And the reason I'm making comments before I even start coding is it really sort of, I guess, focuses me as to what I'm doing at that current moment. I'm not wasting too much time because I already know what I'm about to do. And when people come and read my code later, it's already well commented. So, because self.results is equal to none by default, we want to, when we first process it, I'm going to set that to the empty list. Self.results is equal to the empty list. So now when we come into get results, no matter what we actually end up doing inside process, we know that we're not going to be raising this value error, right? Okay, so after this, and I might put this up here actually, now I'm going to make the comments. So I eventually want to sort results first by place and then by corresponding event name. What I'm thinking about now is that if I'm needing results and event names, results and events, it might be useful to generate a list of tuples containing first of all the result and then the event. So that's going to be my first section. I'm going to generate a list of tuples, and I might go like this: result, event, tuples for this particular athlete. And then after we sort the results, I want to extract. I'm going to sort the list of tuples, now instead of the results. I'm going to, after this, extract the results from the list and update our internal result presentation. Okay, cool. So, starting off here, if I want to generate a list of tuples, first of all, I'm going to need an empty list that I'm going to build up eventually. So, what would be a nice name for this list? Maybe something like result event tups. Yeah, sure. And I want that to be the empty list by default. Okay, now let's start to build it up. I have an athlete here, and we know, as seen in the CountryResults methods, we can get all the events for this athlete and then the corresponding result. So let's do this. For event in self.athlete.get events, and then I can get the corresponding result, and I want to add them both to this list as a tuple. So I'm going to say result event tups.append. Okay, and what are we going to append? We're going to append a tuple here, and that tuple is going to be self._athlete.get result of this event, and that's a bit complex to be looking at, so I might make this a new line. Okay, and this will get the appropriate result for this event and this athlete, and now we can just append tuple as result event. Cool. So something I saw quite often or I guess not quite often, but a few times, at least enough to warrant an explanation as to why you shouldn't do this, is instead of having these extra set of brackets around result and event here, I would see this. And let's try and see what happens there. If we come up in here, we're going to get a type error saying append only, or sorry, takes exactly one argument, and we have given it 2. And that's on line 72 here. So yeah, we've given it result and event, and we sort of meant for that to be a tuple, maybe assuming that this whole thing is a tuple, but we forgot that we need to add the extra set of brackets if we want to make that one argument as a tuple. Okay, so cool, we have now generated a list of result event tuples for this particular athlete. That's awesome. Now we want to sort them. Okay, so this requires a little bit more thought. We are going to be using the list.sort method, and this sort of brings me to the main mistake that I ended up seeing in processing. So if we did go result event tups.sort, assuming, actually no, let's just run that and see what happens. Okay, athlete results test 3, this is in processing, and it says a type error. This thing, the less than sign, which sort of means comparison, is not supported between instances of result and result. So what on earth does that mean? Well, Python by default does not know how to sort results, or rather compare results, because remember that result is a class that we have defined for ourselves, and we didn't tell Python how it should compare them. So it's going to complain. It's just going to say, look, I don't know how to do that, and here's an error. If we want to change that, we can give this sort method a key. And what this key parameter, what we give it is a function. And that function will be called on every single element within this list, and it should return something that Python knows how to sort. So we're going to be generating a function here, or creating a function here, which is called on these tuples of results events, and it will return me another tuple, which is going to be first an integer corresponding to the place, and second a string corresponding to the event name. Okay, so there are two ways of doing this. You can make a lambda function. I'm not going to be doing that because I don't believe we have covered it yet. Instead, I'm going to be showing you how you would make your own sorting function. So I'm just going to make a new function here. I'm going to call it result event sort. What does it take? It takes an element, and this is a function, so I have to give it a docstring, and that docstring is going to be now. I don't know if that's the best docstring. I could probably improve it. Probably not making it a simple term, a simple form. Sorry, but something more like this, making it a little bit more readable. Okay, and what does this function want to be doing? Well, we just want to be returning, quite simply, a tuple, and that tuple is going to be first, again, element0.getPlace. Okay, so what this means right here is element0, remember that this result event sort is going to be called on every single element within this result event tuples list. So each of these are, this parameter every time is going to be a tuple, and the tuple is going to be of result event. So if I say element 0, the 0th index of element, what I'm referring to is the result object which I'm passing in. So I'm calling this getPlace method on that result. But remember that getPlace actually returns a string, and so we should convert this to an integer if we want it to be sorted like an int. I will come back to this later. Actually, no, I'm going to leave it like this for now and show you the relevant error message that happens if you try and sort it otherwise. As a string instead of an int, and then I'll come back and correct that later. So second of all, we want element1.getName. Okay, cool. And again, element1 is the event, and getting the name of the event is just going to return a string. So what is this? This is a tuple, which is an integer, or at least it should be an integer. This is actually currently a string right now, and a string. Okay, so we now supply the name of this function to key. And now this function will be called on every element in the result events tups list. Okay, so at this stage we have now sorted the whole list by first place and then by corresponding event name, or at least we think we have. It's going to cause an error later on. Finally, we want to extract the results from the list and update our internal results representation up here. So what I'm going to say is for result event in, and I just copied that, result event tups. What do I want to do? I want to self._results.pen just the result. Okay, cool. And I mean, this should work. It's not going to, and now I'm going to show you why. Oh, good. We actually get to fix a few error messages in this one error here. So, what the hell is this? You might have come across this inside your own assignments. It's going to say assertion error list differ, and then it has this extremely difficult to read set of memory addresses and what the result is at that location. So how do we fix this? We're actually going to go backwards now. We're going to go back into entities, and we are going to give results a repr method. So what is a repr method? If you are trying to, I guess, just print a result to the terminal like we are here, repr method will be able to make it a human readable form as opposed to this disgusting what object it is, what memory location it is. So the way you do it is like this. And what the repr method generally wants to look like is the same sort of code that you would use to create the object in the first place. So a result just takes a result value. So we are just going to say okay, now let's run this again and see what happens. So this is a little bit more readable. Instead of having those big memory locations, we can see that this is what we have here, this list, and this is what it was expecting. It wants 60 first, then 174, then 28, and we gave it 174, then 28, and then 60. So this is a little bit more difficult to debug than you might expect. But essentially the error here is that we tried to sort the result event tuples by first the string corresponding to the get place. But if I do change this to an int, then we can see that now AthleteResults test is all working fine. And I mean, at this point, now that we have proper comments in here as well, we can just leave this method. It's effectively done and we don't have to think about it again. If you had got to this point and you had written out all the code and you hadn't commented it yet, you might be so excited by the fact that you got your test working for AthleteResults tests that you don't want to look at it again. You go past it. So again, writing comments even before you start to write the code is generally quite a good way of programming. Okay, a few changes from the last clip, I guess. I've just made this comment in here to demonstrate that every time that we call process, self.results will actually regenerate. Apart from that, the only other change I've made off screen is that I have given every entity a repr method, apart from events, which I don't think we will be using. Okay, so we're moving on to EventResults now, and this is extremely similar to AthleteResults. What we're doing, instead of returning a list of results, we're returning a list of athletes. They're still ordered place first, but instead of now sorting secondly by event name, we're going to sort secondly by athlete name. So I'm not going to be doing too much talking for this class, apart from when needed, just because it's practically a clone of AthleteResults, and I don't feel like wasting your time. This is already quite a long video. So first off, again, what we want to do is be making those comments that make it very easy to write code. Instead of a result event tuple, we actually want a result athlete tuple for this particular event. Okay, instead of appending, I guess, just the result, since we're not going to be using the result afterwards, after we determine the placing, I can actually just say, in this case, I'm going to go like this instead. Places equal to the int of athlete.getResult.getPlace. And now I can just have the place there instead. Okay. I'm going to be showcasing how to sort now based on a lambda function in this case. So I can say okay, and again I am setting self.results here to the empty list every time that we call processing. Okay, now let's check if that is going to work or not. Okay, cool, and now events result test is all working fine. So let's now come down to DeterminePlaces, and DeterminePlaces gave people who at least reached it the most difficulty for this assignment. What I'm planning to show here is that even DeterminePlaces can become quite simple if you break it up into the appropriate steps. Okay, so we are now on DeterminePlaces, and I'm going to show you how to do the processing for this class. If I manage to sound depressed throughout this explanation, it's because I'm quite sleepy. I've had my lunch and I'm feeling a bit like a nap, but in any case I'm going to power through this and show you how to finish this. Alright, so as I said before, DeterminePlaces can be quite simple once we break it up into the appropriate steps, so let's make a start on that. First of all, what I'm thinking is that it's extremely difficult to order everything within DeterminePlaces if we haven't given the results a place beforehand. So the first few sections are actually going to be setting the places for each result, and then finally our final few sections are going to look quite similar to what we've seen in EventResults, in that we will have a list of athletes for this event, and we can sort them based on first of all their place in the event, and then second of all their name. In fact, we are actually going to be copying some code across from EventResults. Okay, so first section, we want to get all the results for each athlete in this event, and then we want to sort those results based on their, and I'm struggling to find the word for this. It's not value. Let me just look at processing for a second. If we come into results, result value is what we want to sort it based on. Okay, based on their result value. And we want to reverse it in the case that the event is scored. Because, right, if the event is scored, then the highest score will actually be in first place, so that should come first. Okay, so after we do that, we can now start to assign places each result. Okay, cool. And then our last section will just be, I guess, repeat the process method seen in EventResults. And I will flesh out this particular, what would you call it, this section into a few once we get to it. But let's begin now. So if we want to get all the results for each athlete in the event, this is quite similar to what we've seen before. First of all, if we're going to be getting the results, I'm wanting a list to store them in. So I'm just going to say results is equal to the empty list And actually, before we even do this, let's say self.results is equal to the empty list, because we want to regenerate this every single time. Now, looking at these two things, or these two variables, I don't actually like the naming of results here, just because it's so similar to self._results. That just looks like it could cause an issue for someone who's reading it, or if I was to come back and, I guess, redo this. So I'm going to set this to a name which I guess is a bit, or distinguishes it from the internal self._results. Intermediate results, I think, is a decent name for this. So we started off as the empty list, and then I want to say for athlete in self._event, revent, event. What do I want to do? I want, and sorry, it's not just event, it's get athletes. Silly me, I'm getting quite tired. I'm going to say intermediate results dot append, and what am I appending? I'm appending athlete dot get result of this self.event. Okay, cool. Wait, do I need an extra brackets there? Nope. Okay, so that is the first section done. We have got all the results for each athlete in this event, and we've added them to this list, intermediate results. Okay, now we want to sort those results based on their result value and reverse if the event is scored. So we can say intermediate results dot sort. Okay, we can't just sort the results again because Python doesn't know how to sort results by default. So we need to either give it a function, or I'm just going to be making a lambda function. I mean, a lambda function is a function, but I mean as opposed to defining your own function or method. Oh no, function, sorry. Okay, key is equal to lambda. It's going to be called on a result, and all we are returning is the integer version of that result dot get result. And sorry, not the integer version. This is actually a float, since get result returns a string version of a float. Okay, so after that, the second thing we want to do is specify the reverse key. And the reverse key is going to be the opposite of the is timed boolean that's inside the event. So I'm just going to say is equal to not self.event.is timed. Okay, cool. So now I want to assign places to each result. This is probably the most difficult part to think through inside the whole assignment. Okay, so let's go through it though. So what do we want to make here? We want to make a new variable called previous result. Previous result is going to be equal to intermediate results I minus 1, as in the last index of intermediate results. This will work for every case apart from when I is equal to 0, and in that case I mean previous result will actually be equal to the very end result in intermediate results, and we don't want that. We want to, if we can avoid thinking about that situation, that would be nice. So that's what we're going to do in the next line. Or actually, maybe not in the next line, but in the coming lines. Okay, so we now want to say if I is not equal to 0, so I guess it was the next line, and previous underscore result dot get result is not equal to result dot get result. Oh, sorry, and I'm going to say is actually equal to result dot get result. What this means is that if both previous results, and this is result, not results, if previous result and result have the same result value, then we want to tie them. So I'm going to be setting result.setPlace to the int version of the previous results place. Previous result.getPlace. And remember, since getPlace is a string, I casted here to an int. Okay, cool. And otherwise, all we're going to be doing is saying result.setPlace to i+1. So what this does is, if this current result is not the first result, is not the first result in the list, yes, and the previous result is the same, has the same result value as the current result. Jesus, I am so sleepy. Okay, then I'm going to be setting both of them to have the same place, and otherwise I'm just going to be setting it to the current enumeration +1. So the reason I added this +1 at the end is because if I is equal to 0, I'm thinking, well, I want the place to be first place, you know, instead of 0th place, which wouldn't make a lot of sense there. Okay, so if this whole section is working correctly, and I'm hoping it is, now we are on to this next section, And this next section is practically a clone of what we have done in EventResults, and so much so that I can actually come up here and copy and paste. My favorite thing to do. And let's just check that this works. So the reason I'm able to do the same sort of thing is because now that all the places are set right, it's exactly the same situation as in EventResults. We have an event and we want to return a sorted list of athletes based first on the place and secondly on their name. So we get all the result athlete tuples, and then we sort them based first on this place, which we've made or found up here, and then based on the full name. And then finally we just extract the athletes from the sorted list of tuples. Cool. Let's check that works. I'm hoping it does. That was quite hastily put together. Else. Ooh, that's not good. Okay, let me think. What have I done here? I'm missing a bracket, right? Cool. No, alright, DeterminePlaces is not working. Float argument must be a string or a number, not method. Alright, this is in line 307. Where are we? 307 here. Result is equal to, okay, let me just put brackets around this. Well, actually, maybe that would just work. I think I've sort of located the error there. I've said get result without doing anything, so it assumed that this was or I was rather passing in a function to float rather than a string. Okay, so let's try that again. How many errors will we have to fix? Okay, no, cool, that seemed like it is working. Whew, alright. So something's irking me about my code here. I've ended up copying and pasting, and while that is, as I said, my favorite thing to do, if I am copying and pasting, it sort of indicates to me that I should be making a separate function outside of these classes, which I can supply it an event, and it will give me back a sorted list of the athletes in that event, first on their place and then by their full names. So if I wanted to be pedantic, or if I wanted to, I guess, make this a perfect submission, I would do that. I would separate this into a function and just call it once inside DeterminePlaces and once inside EventResults. Cool. Hi everybody, just some final housekeeping for assignment 2, at least my implementation of it. I said when I left off that I was going to extract, or at least that to make this a perfect submission, I would extract what I had inside EventResults in the processing method, make that into its own function outside of the classes so that it could also be used within DeterminePlaces. So this is the final result of that. And I guess what this method or function does is just take an event and returns the sorted list of athletes, sorted first by their place, and if they tie, then by their name. And sorry, these athletes are the athletes inside that particular event that was passed in. So to see the effects of what that does, I guess, and separating that out is what I mean there, is that if we come into EventResults and look at our process method here, we can see it's practically now a one-liner. And I mean, I find that quite nice. Similarly, if we come down into DeterminePlaces, we also simplified the very end of this, and this is also now quite readable. Okay, there was also an error that I missed, or at least a common error within your submissions that I saw, and that was that within AthleteResults and I guess all the other results classes, I talked a lot earlier on about how you would check that this class or an instance of this class has been processed yet or not. And this was my solution. Something that you guys did that I saw was you used in some cases this athlete result counter, and you checked if that was equal to 0 or not. Now, why might you not want to do this? Well, athlete result counter here, because it's not inside this init method, it doesn't belong to an instance of athlete results. It actually belongs to the whole class. So as an example as to why this might be an issue, say I have two instances of athlete results and I call process on only one of them. Well, this athlete results counter will actually now be updated for the both of them. So for the instance which hasn't been processed yet, if we come down into get results, and assuming that this line doesn't say if self.results equals to none, but if AthleteResults.athlete counter is equal to 0, raise the value error. Well, even though this class hasn't been processed yet, or rather this instance, we will still return self._results, and I mean that will be returning none, and that's most certainly not what is expected from that instance of the class. So that is a potential error which I overlooked. Okay, I think that's the end of this section. If there are any errors that I've missed throughout the video, I'll either add them to the next section, or this might be the end. So thank you very much for watching. I'm hoping it wasn't too boring, although who knows at this point. And yeah, I hope it was helpful as well.